Imagine one morning you wake up, but not in your oh so familiar home. Instead, you find yourself in a thick forest. You can hear the sound of leaves rustling in the wind and the flow of water next to you, indicating a small pond. Because you are conditioned to, you ignore the strange situation for now and move your hand in a practiced motion trying to find your phone. But you only connect with wet grass and earth. Suddenly, you hear a high-pitched voice, barely resembling that of a regular human, calling out to you. Maybe that person knows something about how you got here, or at the very least where you are. You turn around to face the source of the voice and see the last thing you could have expected to. It's a face you have never seen before, never imagined you would, but one you could recognize whatever state you were to find yourself in. In fact, every person should be able to pinpoint this face and attach the correct name to it. A yellow, fur-covered body with red cheeks and a tail resembling the form of lightning greets you with a smile. It's a Pikachu, and it seems like it can speak your language flawlessly. And it tells you something even more disturbing. You yourself look very little like the human you claim to be and much more like a Pokémon. Like this, Pokémon fans back in 2005 were thrust into the world of Pokémon for a wholly new type of adventure. Mystery Dungeon style. A subgenre of games that can be summarized as roguelike dungeon crawlers, but in this case with Pokémon as the game's characters. The first of their kind were called Pokémon Mystery Dungeon Blue Rescue Team and Red Rescue Team, and have been a dominant force on my favorite games list from the moment I first touched them. And now, 15 years later, developers Spike Chunsoft have released Pokémon Mystery Dungeon Rescue Team DX, a faithful retelling of a story from 2005, with a new look and new gameplay features it takes mainly from its newer predecessors. Or so I've heard. I only ever played these, which is why I will mainly be looking at the jump from here to here. So, what happened? Well, the first thing we can notice is how the art direction has changed for the remakes. DX looks absolutely stunning. The initial trailer left a lot of people with uncertainty in regards to whether or not they could enjoy the new look, but we quickly fell in love with the artistic makeover. I mean, have you seen these comparison shots? Game's gorgeous, and also brimming with love and care. Every cutscene, every character, and every location feels like there was a lot of heart put into. And not just that, it's all so unhealthily cute. Every portrait for different emotions, every animation, the new unique designs for items, the scarves, everything is sweet enough to increase tooth decay rate by at least 50%. After playing for more than 3 hours at a time, it is highly advised to consult your dentist or at least rebrush your teeth. Please be safe out there. In the Reborn video, I talked at length about the transmedia world of Pokémon and how each individual entry enhances your view on the whole. But I think I could have lived without seeing Ekans run away like that. Actually, I take that back, I couldn't. What I'm getting at is that a lot of the visual choices in this game can look a little weird at times. This includes some walking animations, Pokémon turning around, or more sound-related stuff like how a cheering crowd of Pokémon sounds much more like a bunch of whistling humans than anything else. But I was never bothered by things like that. In fact, I believe it enhances the game's playful feel. DX has this children's picture book vibe, which is only emphasized when you see something that is a bit rough around the edges. Much like when children draw or perform something that obviously won't be very polished, those tiny mistakes are charming and not something you would criticize. When Ekans runs around like this, you laugh, instead of complaining that it doesn't make sense or breaks immersion. So to summarize, the remake looks incredible and gets its theming just right. Not to take anything away from the older games though. Their sprite art style has aged supremely well and can still hold a candle to games much more recent than them. And now, onto something that has changed very little, if at all. Alright, here's the quick rundown of the game's story. We already know that the avatar turns into a Pokémon without remembering how and why it happened. Figuring this out will have to wait though, because the Pokémon world which we were transported to is currently in danger, and needs a good old chosen one to save it. The world's balance being in disarray for unknown reasons is leading to increased occurrences of natural disasters all across the globe. Nature and Pokémon are in danger. many of them lost in labyrinth-like dungeons, the mystery dungeons the player will be exploring throughout the game. In an attempt to help these endangered Pokémon, official rescue teams were formed that delve into the dungeons to track down and save the lost souls. A dungeon consists of a set amount of randomly generated floors filled with enemies, items, and the stairs leading to the next floor. Find your way through each floor, get to the very end of a dungeon with the treasure you found along the way, rinse and repeat, and you get yourself Mystery Dungeon's main gameplay loop. This is what you learn by being thrown into the introductory dungeon Tiny Woods to save a lost Caterpie. After accomplishing that feat and with nowhere else to go, you and the Pokémon that found you in the forest decide to create a rescue team of your own. Thus begins your journey of saving Pokémon, being witch hunted, then saving more Pokémon, and lastly, saving the world. All the while slowly finding out the truth about the chaos this world is experiencing and why you are here. The actual quality of the story and its coherence isn't all that impressive, and leaves a few opportunities for nitpicking. Like how none of these Pokémon know about evolution, not even the ones that are already in evolved forms. Or how easily your friends turn on you because one random guy brought up an old fairy tale that makes it sound like the Avatar is the cause for all the world's troubles. And of course almost everyone just believes him. No evidence needed, no trial, nothing. It's exactly this medieval thinking that is holding back the Pokémon world's justice system. And after being proven innocent, everyone just goes, I knew it.
Well then why were you trying to straight up murder me?
Spike Chunsoft keeping it real with how quickly people can change. Way too real. But without this realness, we wouldn't have had some of the greater emotional moments. One of those happens shortly before becoming fugitives, when all of our real friends come to say goodbye. For now. You know the ones. There's the snot-nosed little kid and his chubby best friend and the weird siblings? Let's face it, they're all dorks, but they are the dorks that will be there for you no matter what. And then you see the cute portraits and BAM! Out of nowhere. Emotional gut punch. One of many in the game, which make it feel so much more special. What the narrative lacks in elegance and polish, it makes up for with heart and emotion. And maybe that's the nostalgia speaking, coupled with the lower expectations of Child Tim, but I look back fondly on the game's story. In a sense, it's much like what I had said about the title's art. Not perfect, but charming, cute, and full of heart. And that's the story of the originals. If you've played them, I hope you liked it, because you will be seeing the same thing again in the remake. So, with that out of the way, let's get to some of the many changes. As the video title suggests, the remakes were made to be more up to date with our current standard of games. That included changing a lot of things, like cleaning up menus and interfaces, for example. Here are some of those quality of life changes. Shopping for items was improved by now being able to select multiple items to buy and sell at a time. Kangaskhan's item storage also received slight changes so you can manage your goods more easily. You get lots more info before going into a dungeon, like the Pokémon you can find in them and how many floors it has in total. And you can edit your team directly from here by changing members, giving out items, and even accessing the storage or the bank. It's more convenient and saves a lot of running back and forth, but does make some of the buildings in town, namely the bank and storage, feel somewhat obsolete, since you don't really have to visit them anymore. The player can now prepare multiple teams ahead of time and just choose which one to pick before entering a dungeon. Water and other special environmental tiles are now shown on the map and can be differentiated through color coding. Sometimes when battling Pokémon in a dungeon, they feel inspired and ask to join your rescue team, but not always does the timing for this work out well. What I greatly appreciated in DX is this: the game does not make you feel bad for declining said Pokémon. It keeps the description neutral instead of reminding us of the dreams we just crushed. Yay, denial. There's now an early shortcut to the Pelipper post, the place where you get most of your miscellaneous jobs. TMs sparkle when a Pokémon on the team can learn the move. A nice touch, but once you have a lot of members on your team, pretty much every TM will sparkle, so at that point it makes no difference anymore. You can teach moves and the like to every Pokémon in the rescue team without having to go to them or get them to the TM. To make finding specific mons for this easier, you can favorite whoever you want, making them appear at the top of the list. In the originals, having you or your partner faint in a dungeon would count as a loss, resulting in you getting teleported out and losing your money and some items. In the remake, punishment is slightly increased by losing your money and all items. But here, every team member has to faint before that happens, meaning you can still keep going if one faints. The third Pokemon you can bring into a dungeon with you also counts for this. So you have 3 and have to lose all, instead of having 2 of which you can't lose a single one. Having Pokemon faint can happen very easily in both games, and often does so without the player having much agency in it all. It feels terrible to get a game over because of getting unlucky once. The new way is more lenient and allows for comebacks by playing well or getting lucky and finding revive items, the most important ones in both games being reviver seeds. If you happen to lose a Pokemon, it will immediately use up a seed and be revived and healed. This would happen as soon as any Pokemon fainted in Red and Blue Rescue Team, whereas in DX you can choose whether you want to use it or not. Having a less important member faint because of bad AI, bad RNG, or both feels a lot worse when they also waste a reviver seed in the process. Now you still feel terrible when subjected to bad AI or RNG, but at least you have the choice of keeping the reviver seed. Status changing moves now affect all Pokemon at once instead of one after the other, which gets rid of a lot of unnecessary time spent waiting and not playing. Players don't need field HMs such as Surf or Dive anymore to go to certain dungeons. Partners received AI improvements and decisions are more often left for the player to make, instead of having things happen automatically. For instance, when a Pokemon is in danger because of a bad status condition or low health, your team members will notice and propose using their turn on healing said Pokemon. Ultimately, the decision is left up to the player though. When examining fighting, Chunsoft got rid of the normal attack every Pokemon was able to use in the originals. It wasn't part of the actual moveset and basically just a way to save PP, or power points, which show how many times you can use an attack before you run out and have to refresh with an item. Losing the regular attack is fine though, because now every Pokemon gets 4 decent to good moves to start with, so there is more PP to work with and more possible decisions to make when attacking. The selection of moves has also been improved in classic Nintendo Switch style. Holding the left trigger opens this menu, where players only have to press either up, down, left or right depending on what attack they want to use. This nice way of assigning buttons allows people not as used to the controller or games in general to quickly figure out what to press. Where each button is in relation to the others can easily be felt, while arbitrarily assigned names such as A and B button have to be remembered. It's an intuitive way to quickly access all 4 moves. The next changes I will be talking about are much more significant and would be better described as overhauls to the game design. First up, gummies. In the originals, gummies were regular items to be found in dungeons or received as quest rewards. Eating one would increase the Pokemon's IQ stat, which the higher it was, allowed access to more IQ skills for that mon. Most of these skills allowed players to adjust how Pokemon would act in certain situations. In a way, it made it possible to further customize the AI to an extent, by forcing a partner to only use moves and not regular attacks, for example. In DX, there is no IQ stat anymore and only 2 types of gummies: Rainbow and the higher quality DX gummies. Both types of gummies will increase a random stat of the Pokemon that consumed it. The skills are replaced by so-called rare qualities. Pokemon can randomly have one of them and can learn more by eating gummies. Only one rare quality can be active at a time, but their effects are a lot stronger than IQ skills and apply to every Pokemon in your party. This makes it so that every member suddenly has different roles in the team, depending on which rare quality it developed. You might bring one to increase stamina, one to make recruiting easier, one to help with accuracy, and so on. Gummies the way they work now are a lot less grindy, while still letting players make decisions as to how they want to play. Before, you had to give a lot of gummies to always unlock the same skills at the same time, no matter the Pokemon. It's predictable and doesn't feel very special, and if you do that a couple times, becomes extremely tedious. Since it also uses up much more resources, it was only really viable to use a lot of gummies on a few chosen Pokemon. The remakes make it a lot easier to get every Pokemon up to speed and more usable, something that we will be able to observe a few more times. Like I said, rare qualities work on every Pokemon in your squad. With a maximum team size of 4 Pokemon in a dungeon from the originals, that would already be a big deal. But what if I told you in DX you blast through dungeons with a party of up to 8 Pokemon? You can only bring a team of 3 of your own members though, and the rest will have to be recruited along the way. Having this many enemies join you seems like a lot when imagining Red and Blue Rescue Team, but this is 2020 and things have changed. We're not a team anymore, we're an army. Recruiting wild Pokémon has never been this easy before. First of all, because achieving the best odds isn't as tedious anymore. I'll spare you the math, but a Pokémon at least level 90 holding the friend bow item was necessary. To acquire the item in question, players had to go through the 20-floor post-game dungeon Solar Cave to get a key, only to take that key to Mount Faraway, where they could open a locked door on floor 30. And if they fainted anywhere with it equipped, they would lose the friend bow and be forced through the entire thing again. In DX, chances appear to be higher and somewhat more streamlined. Exact data doesn't seem to be available at the time of writing the script, but I and everyone else I've seen play the games have clearly had more recruitment offers, and also from Pokémon that could never be recruited in Red and Blue. Players also never have to worry about party size. The 2005 titles assign a size value of 1, 2, 3 or 4 to each Pokémon, with 4 being the tallest of them all. Your entire party could never go above a total value of 6, no matter what. In the new game, you can go into a dungeon with 3 giant legendary Pokémon, and still recruit 5 more. Another way to get Pokémon to join you real quick is through fainted mons that sometimes spawn on floors. After re-energizing them with an apple, they will always ask to join your squad. With all of this combined, finding new team members is a whole lot easier and way less frustrating in this game. One thing I've not mentioned about recruiting yet is that you need what the originals call partner areas to successfully do so. A partner area is a place where your team members can stay while they're on hold. In Red and Blue, if you don't have the right one for a Pokémon, it can never be recruited, but in DX that becomes possible, if only temporarily. They will go through the dungeon with you and afterwards leave you again, but not without thanking you for the fun adventure with a little bit of coin. A smart reward since it's going to help you buy more areas to be able to recruit more Pokémon. In DX, partner areas are called rescue team camps, by the way. They don't vary too much from their 15-year-old counterparts, except for the fact that they're just images instead of explorable spaces you can see a Pokémon run around in. Very pretty images, sure, but that was by far the thing I was most looking forward to in this entire game, and I just can't believe they've done this. Something you can also recruit a lot easier in DX than in the originals are legendary Pokémon. Over the course of your adventure, you will be able to fight all legendaries from the first 3 generations, each of them being the keeper of a specific dungeon. Or more like the sleeper, because that is apparently all they do. And lucky you, accidentally wake them up and get attacked by the grumpy beasts. A very real reaction after someone interrupts your sweet apple dreams. Oh, and after you beat them up, they want to join your team for some reason. Most of them guaranteed on the first try even, which only really makes sense from a gameplay perspective. In a game about collecting Pokémon, you want players to be able to recruit the biggest and coolest Pokémon of them all to allow for some amazing endgame rewards. In DX that just happens after beating them once. In the originals, legendary Pokémon had a chance to join you every time you beat them, just like any other Pokémon you found in the wild. It was consistent, and it made more sense that after showcasing your power and defeating them often enough, they would end up with severe Stockholm Syndrome and ask to join. Or at least it felt like it made a little more sense. Maybe I'm the one with Stockholm Syndrome. The remake sacrifices this little bit of consistency and reason to make gameplay less frustrating. I can't say that going through a 99-floor dungeon to recruit the legendary Pokémon at the end of it, only to get unlucky and having to do the entire thing again, is a good feeling. It's not, and it feels terrible. Especially when combined with the grind you already have to go through to get the best odds for recruiting. Encountering and fighting bosses, on the other hand, has been intensified tenfold, both in visuals and gameplay. Big Pokémon are portrayed with gigantic models spanning multiple tiles, giving most legendary Pokémon that feeling of impact and force that they used to lack in Red and Blue Rescue Team. Also, their entrances and all-around animations and effects are just plain cool. And also look at this, you can bring your army. It's like a friggin' raid battle up in here. Boss fights in this game are, and I'm sorry for using this kind of language, epic. Further chances of strategy and preparation are added by allowing more items to be usable in these fights. Orbs are probably the biggest factors for this, as they have the potential of being very powerful items that can stun or put legends to sleep. Now that bosses have to deal with well-equipped armies, the team was forced to do some balancing work. Some bosses will now use their powers to scatter the party about. Air currents might sweep you away if not careful, magma slowly creeps up on you, or water will slow the movement of Pokémon not used to it. Suddenly, players need to keep tabs on the environment and deal with different types of challenges you couldn't find in the 2005 games. Certain Pokémon might even bring back a blast from the past and go primal, or awaken newfound powers and achieve Mega Evolution. To deal with potential 1 vs 8 fights, legendary Pokémon prepared a few AoE moves that luckily appear to less often be attacks hitting the entire room. Moves like that can't be played around and can easily defeat a large number of Pokémon in one go, without the player having any say in the matter. The amount of team members hit by a line shot, for example, can be minimized through clever maneuvering, making it a test of skill rather than luck. Next up, some quick ones. The Makuhita Dojo used to be a place where players could train in short dungeons filled with specific types of Pokémon with a team of bosses to fight against on the 3rd and final floor. Most interesting part about it is that some of these teams were rescue teams we had already encountered throughout the story, adding some continuity and making the world feel more real. These could also be recruited, even if the chances for doing so were very low. The new Makuhita Dojo in DX is a 1-floor fighting gauntlet with a timer. Through doing missions and exploring dungeons, players can acquire dojo tickets, which then allow entry to it. The better the ticket, the more time you have and the higher the boost to your experience points. In other words, it's now a fast-paced and easier way of leveling up that feels like it should get boring very quickly, but somehow doesn't. Evolution also changed. Players are now actually told in-game what the requirements for evolving a Pokémon are. Plus, those requirements were massively simplified. In Red and Blue, just like in the main titles, there are a lot of different items that may be necessary for evolution, as well as other factors such as happiness or leveling up in specific places, at specific times, or with your DS turned upside down. Yeah. Not all of these were in the originals, but it was still very annoying to have so many different items you had to find behind locked doors on specific floors and specific dungeons. Now evolutions only happen through level up or by using the all-purpose evolution crystals. Way easier to understand and accomplish, while feeling a little less special. If you've played some of the newer main series titles, one controversy you might be familiar with is the inclusion of a team-wide experience share system in some of them. DX also decided to throw something like this in, instead of only having Pokémon that actively participate in a dungeon exploration gain experience points. The remake makes it a point that every Pokémon, even the ones currently waiting in rescue camps, gets stronger when the main team fights off foes. This allows the player to use different Pokémon that they maybe just recruited recently without having to put in a lot of work for each new member. Now, the team can be more easily adjusted based on the situation, something the originals advertised but couldn't pull off as well. In those games, I would just end up using my one completely overpowered main for everything, even if it was at a type disadvantage in some dungeons. Putting enough energy into other Pokémon to make them worth using never seemed worth it. DX makes it so players have to commit less and have more options in changing their team around. This can already be seen very early into the game. The originals only allowed changing the 2 core party members and the leader starting with the post-game. The remake lets you change leaders, meaning the Pokémon you control, directly after Tiny Woods and even inside dungeons. These changes, together with the team-wide XP share, give players a lot more freedom, especially during the earlier stages of the game. So, now let's talk about some of the new stuff. There is Auto Mode, which allows you to let the game play itself to speed up movement until encountering an enemy. Not as smart as an actual person, but a faster way of moving around if used correctly. I would not rely on it though, as it's already easy enough for stuff to go terribly wrong in this game, even with the player's influence. So I don't really need to make it harder on myself, especially in the more dangerous dungeons. Good for the Makuhita Dojo though. Moves power up now. Using an attack a lot will make it stronger by either increasing accuracy, PP, or power. This is a way of making even weaker moves useful in the long run and gives a gradual power progression for Bartos achievers. Here we can also see again how the team tried to make using different Pokémon viable by making move level ups global. So using Blizzard with one Pokémon will also strengthen it with others. Strong foes can appear. These are like mini bosses, stronger than the regular riffraff in a dungeon and dropping deluxe boxes when defeated. They're also the only Pokémon in the game that can be shiny. Another thing not in the 2005 versions. Boxes, specifically the deluxe versions. In a dungeon completely useless, but if taken outside with you, can be opened, revealing useful items such as gummies, dojo tickets, or TMs. Secret houses. Replacing the old key rooms are now secret clubhouses. Instead of a key, an invitation is needed to access, which in essence is only a different skin for keys. But the content of these rooms are slightly different from the originals. Since HMs and all the different evolution items aren't needed anymore, it freed the team up to further emphasize their theme of recruiting. Because in them you find up to 3 Pokémon, each with a rare quality, who will happily join your squad. As well as some high tier items like Revive All Orbs, one of many new interesting items. This one allows the revival of every fainted Pokémon in the party. But it only works on your up to 5 non-main party members when used on the floor they fainted on. Because of this limitation, players will have to decide when it's worth using them and when a Pokémon should be abandoned, as harsh as that sounds. Some other new items not seen in the original rescuing games are Storage, Bank and Wigglytuff Orbs, which all allow in-dungeon access to certain establishments of Pokémon Square. They will help with managing resources and adjusting strategies on the fly. The inclusion of Wigglytuff Orbs especially adds some more depth, as they allow players with enough money to buy the rescue camp they need even when on the go. Being prepared means you won't have to leave Pokémon behind, if you don't want to. Parkling tiles. Not actually called that, but it's what my script says, so whatever. They're indicated by parkles on the ground and will either summon an item or less frequently an enemy. Pop-up messages. When using moves, or encountering opponents, or using items, or being low on health. If you're like me, you will only consciously notice them after someone points them out to you, even though you've already played the game for multiple hours. If you do notice them, their annoyance can range from, at first I actually didn't mind them at all, but after playing for a while I'm starting to change my mind, to about a quarter of Navi. The Awaken status. Empowerment seeds activate a powered up mode of whatever Pokémon you want. Be careful though, as enemies can also awaken if they manage to defeat one of your party members. If a to-be awakened Pokémon has ever received a Mega Evolution, it will also change to that. New Pokémon. While keeping the pool of available Pokémon true to the originals, some new faces still manage to slip in. More recent evolutions or baby Pokémon of old ones, as well as the aforementioned Mega Evolutions, are present in the X. The Speed stat. It measures accuracy and evasiveness, is what the game says, but I've heard other things. Right now there is still a lot of inconsistent information on this game in general, so before I start spouting complete nonsense, let's transition to the next topic. The next topic. The next topic. The next topic. Okay, here are some of the things players might not enjoy so much. After all, some people may end up buying this game because of me, so it's only fair I mention some of the things that rubbed me the wrong way, so that you can avoid getting rubbed by surprise. Don't rub inappropriately, it's not cool. I already said similar things a couple times, but losing in Mystery Dungeon sucks. It's very frustrating in a lot of ways. Not only do all your hard-earned items vanish, a major setback and terrible feeling overall, but your way of preventing this from happening is also unfun. If you can't accept the loss, your team, much like the Pokémon you save all the time, will have to be rescued as well. You can either do this on your own with a different team of Pokémon, or ask online for someone to do it. Sounds great in theory, especially since it's a mechanic very much integrated into the game world's lore, but tedious in practice. After all, in essence it's either doing the exact same dungeon you just went through again but slightly different, or waiting and praying for someone to help you. As long as the novelty factor is still there, it might be interesting enough, but after a couple times it will become only annoying. The amount of randomness and brokenness in the Mystery Dungeon games can also lead to mixed feelings in players. Attacks that hit the entire room and multi-hit moves are at the forefront when it comes to frustrating gameplay. Room attacks cannot always be played around, and when you're unlucky and a Flygon in Sky Tower decides to magnitude 10 you at the wrong time, it can potentially decimate the entire team. And often you can do nothing about it because of a bad spawn or other dumb circumstances. Sky Tower's role in the main story also doesn't allow players to change the main squad much, meaning preparing by putting in Pokémon resistant to such threats is not an option either. The same happens in the Fugitive section. Have fun fighting through and beating Articuno and its ice dungeon, or Moltres and its fire dungeon with a grass or ground starter. In Red and Blue, bosses' room attacks would often one-shot you, bad type matchup or not. Without reviver seeds, this was a giant pain to deal with, and would likely result in a cycle of trial and error, waiting for the boss to show mercy and not use its strongest attack. What fun. Less entire room moves and being able to win with just one Pokémon alive made these fights much more bearable in DX. One more thing I mentioned were multi-hit moves. These can hit you a maximum of 5 times, just like in the main games. However, in those, the power of each individual attack was quite low, whereas here, one attack is about as strong as regular ones, resulting in a move that can easily one-shot any Pokémon as long as RNG allows for a high number of hits. There's a lot more stuff that can end up being unfun in unlucky situations, but I think you get the point, and I don't want to spoil all the fun. Or unfun. The last big thing I could see annoying people is more targeted towards fans of Red and Blue Rescue Team. Because of all the features I already talked about taking up time, the X plays a lot slower. The increased amount of recruiting going on, the fainted Pokémon on some floors, or the new animations are just some. The AI is smarter and will now use moves more consistently, which can take up a lot of time when something ends up spamming room moves, or thinks it's being helpful by using healing pulls. In a longer water dungeon, I recruited a Slowpoke along the way that would always use healing pulls on my team members to restore their health when they were low, which I really appreciated. At some point though, I mega evolved my Absol, not realizing that its ability would change to Magic Bounce. In other words, it was now immune to moves such as healing pulls. So now every time Absol was low on HP, Slowpoke would try to use the healing move on it, without effect. Since Absol didn't get healed, Slowpoke would then do it again every single one of its turns, while I had to sit through the animation, turn after turn after turn. And since the Pokémon was one I recruited along the way, I couldn't access its moves and tell it not to use healing pulls anymore. And it also couldn't run out of PP. Normally a cool feature to make sure they don't become burdens, but in this case absolutely excruciating. Talking about team members, since in this game having a party of 6 or more Pokémon is quite normal, players will also run into fights much more often. And a lot of the time it will be your AI recruits that will get in one, with your main team being too far away to intervene in a meaningful way. So the player ends up ignoring the situation or going back to help. Regardless of the decision, your helpers will probably either end up fainting or just slowing you down by using bad moves for the situation. Combine all of this with a feature that sometimes makes it so moves are used a second time without using PP, for example when trying to heal a Pokémon that can't be healed, and you end up with a game that takes up a lot more of your time for quote-unquote the same amount of content as the originals did. A lot of this comes down to a change of perspective on the developer's side. While being so similar, both the titles from 2005 and the current one focus on slightly different things, resulting in a different experience. The originals definitely feel old in the sense that they play very much like the games back then used to. Resources were harder to come by, information was not as easily accessible, and gameplay could get a tad frustrating at times. The newer games feel, well, newer, with everything that entails. It received a ton of nice quality of life updates, focuses more on recruiting and lets players go wild, but play slower. Some of the changes, such as making every Pokémon recruitable and increasing recruitment chances, making important items easier to get, removing the need for field HMs, the team-wide experience share, making evolutions easier / more accessible, or making legendaries auto-recruits can feel like what is casually described as casualization, where mechanics of games are simplified, or in slightly less optimistic terms, dumbed down. Removing complexity and interesting gameplay choices that allow for more unique builds and expression is probably not a good thing if it's replaced by nothing of substance. But if it means removing something frustrating or grindy, then I'm all for it. Luckily, DX is much more the latter than the former. Plus, some of the new features add more depth to already existing systems, which counteracts that simplification. Now, with all of this in mind, the good, the bad, the new and the overhauled, is it a good remake? Yeah, absolutely. Is it better than the originals? Yes and no. They're both good in their own ways and I like them for different things. Did it go above and beyond? No. Is it a good standalone game worth getting? For me, yes. I still can't accept the partner area change though. I think at its core, Rescue Team DX is what Pokémon Red and Blue Rescue Team would have been if the games came out today. It feels not like an evolution, but rather like the game the team was imagining back in 2005. It's a culmination of an old idea for a Pokémon game about exploring randomly generated dungeons and Spike Chunsoft's modern way of design. But no matter which design philosophy from which year is being followed, it doesn't change the fact that the product is always a heartwarming narrative combined with some fun gameplay. So feel free to dig in however you see fit. That doesn't mean you can rub things though. No rubbing.